welcome to IDFC First Bank presents ET Now, Leaders of Tomorrow's Springboard, and here in the iconic city of Lucknow. Now, as the state of Uttar Pradesh eyes a $1 trillion economy, the city of Lucknow's small business sector certainly seems to be at an inflection point. To shed more light on the subject and what lies ahead, we're joined by a distinguished panel of domain experts, and with that, I officially welcome you to the Leaders of Tomorrow's Springboard in the iconic city of Lucknow.
7 years ago, all right, Uttar Pradesh was the country's 7th largest economy. And today it is the country's 2nd largest economy. So through the lens of small businesses, like all the entrepreneurs sitting in this very room, do you believe they've felt the impact of that transformation? Or do figures not tell the whole story?
So, Pooja, I think it's a bit of a paradox. Because you're right, in several senses, we have come a long way. But, if you look at the scheme of things in totality, for, looking at country as a whole, then there's a long way to go also. If you look at India's economy, we are about $400 billion economy now, right? $1 trillion economy, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, 5 trillion we have to become. So, $4 trillion we have become almost, but this year we'll touch $4 trillion, right? But if you look at UP's economy is about, $312 billion. That's the size of our economy, right? We are just about 7.5% of India's economy, right? And if you look at the aspirational target of $1 trillion, what we have to define is by when? I mean, the matter of fact, one day or the other, we'll hit $1 trillion for no fault of ours, right? We'll become $1 trillion, right? But how soon it becomes, what is the end date? But, this target came when the Prime Minister came here for one of the investors' meet, and I happened to be present in that auditorium where it happened. And, there he embarked upon that India as a country should embark upon a very ambitious target of, $5 trillion for its economy. In foreseeable future, even then, at that time, he didn't mention about which year. Yeah. But in the same breath, in the same context, UP was, because UP's population was about 16 to 17% of India's population. Right. Then he said that with a bit of a stretch, UP should also account for 16 to 17% of India's GDP. And if India's GDP has to become $5 trillion, then UP has to happen with a bit of a stretch, almost 20% of that. That's how the $1 trillion number came.
That's the math.
So UP has, by the way, UP has also perhaps one of the only states in the country which has set up a whole ministry or maybe a department which is called the $1 trillion economy department, But the fact is, this target is to be owned by the chief executive of the state, which is the chief minister. It can't be a target owned by a bureaucrat because it's a all-pervasive thing. The obsession for growth, the obsession for increase in GDP has to be reflected in every walk of life, in the way you manage departments, the way you manage corporations, the way you manage industry, the way you interface with the industry. Everything has to improve. Our ease of doing business has improved, Pooja, but the fact is we still have a long way to go. Wherever rules had to change, I think government should be given the credit. They've done a reasonably good job if you go by the rule book. Wherever there are, clearances happening through the e-governance route, automatic approval route, there also improvement has been there. But wherever there is a human interface between industry and the babus, I'm afraid from whatever I hear, things have not improved as much as they should have improved, as they have improved in Maharashtra, in Gujarat, in Telangana, in Andhra, in Tamil Nadu. I think the same, kind of a very, very different attitude to change, to treat industry as a partner in progress, rather than somebody who's there all the time to you with a begging bowl. I think that attitude is yet to change. Things are happening. I mean, to look at the positive side. So, I mean, it's a glass half full or half empty, whichever way you look at this, Pooja.
Well, Jayant, I appreciate your candor, and I want to come to you now, Vinamra sir, because we've heard some optimism, some reasons for skepticism. And I think Jayant has really broken down the math for us very beautifully. So if projections are to be believed, and if Uttar Pradesh is to become a $1 trillion economy by 2027, the math indicates that it needs to grow at a rate of over 30% per annum. Current growth rates are far closer to 15%, if I'm not mistaken. So we're looking at doubling growth rate, even in an ideal best case scenario. How realistic is that?
Thank you, Pooja. To be very honest, I don't think that's very realistic looking at 2027 as the target. UP has a lot going for it. It is the country's largest consuming market. We do have a very, very highly developed industry in the western part of the state. However, if you look at the east, if you look at the southern part of the state, what we typically call in Bundelkhand, Dakshinanchal or Purvanchal, these areas have a lot to happen. But again, for us to even get to close to that 30%, and again, just to echo what Jain said and take it forward, in addition to what Jain said, as the CEO of the state owning this target and driving everybody, I think the other big change that is required is that while you have a lot of very good policies that you've been able to launch, and you are launching policies still. We heard of a semiconductor policy the other day that's probably in the offing that's going to be launched. It's extremely important to look at the processes at the ground level, which the industrialist or the entrepreneur deals with on a day in and day out basis.
Yeah.
It's not every day that you can approach a secretary of a department for a solution to a problem, or the CM of the state for a solution of the problem. You are dealing with your tier 3, tier 4 level government machinery, and I think that is where the challenge still lies.
Absolutely. And Jyotsna, some excellent points here. A critical one is the one around information overload, right? So no matter where you are on the totem pole, if the right information isn't coming to you, then I think Lucknow's small business entrepreneurs have every right to ask, whose doors do they knock on? What are the industry bodies that essentially represent their voice? And how might you answer that?
So everyone's points are very valid. I just want to add one more point to the facts and figures that we started out with. Now, UP is primarily an agricultural economy. However, being the second largest sort of agricultural land production, I think we have something 16.8 million hectares of agricultural land. We're only producing 19% of the country's food. Now, we've got states all over India which have actually moved forward organic farming, and organic farming was something that India was always known for. The Green Revolution, which was actually a misnomer, took us back. And now Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Sikkim, so many other states have moved forward, but we're still stuck somewhere.
Right. So much like that ratio of, if Uttar Pradesh is nearly 20% of the nation's population, but less than 10% of its GDP contribution, and you're bringing up a similar point on the agriculture side of things. Mind you, there is no shortage of fertile land, and there is no inadequacy with respect to water supply either.
It's the most fertile. This is the, the Indo-Gangetic. We have the most fertile land. So there's lots that can be done there. So yes, the information overload is also something. Does information get to the people who need it? So when we talk to farmers, how are we getting to the farmers? What is the inputs that we're giving to the farmers? There's a lack of information there as well. The fertilizers that are used, the products that are used, there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done with that.
So, Pooja, if I may just add, just to add, a little more weight to what Jyotsna said. We are the largest food grain producer in the country. Almost 18 to 19% of the country's food bowl comes from UP, right? But if you look at the food processing, where is look at the farmers' income. Look at how they survive. A lot of them are poor and marginal farmers, right? It is the food processing where the economic value add happens, right? There we are not the top food processing, country. Milk, he's here. And we are the largest milk producer. We are the largest meat producer, right? But we are the largest milk producer. But are we also the largest milk product state in the country. That's also. So I think we have to look at food processing. That's equally important rather than just core food grain.
We continue to bring you all the highlights from the leaders of tomorrow's Springboard here in the city of Lucknow on the other side of this break. So don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching our continued coverage of IDFC First Bank presents ET Now, Leaders of Tomorrow's Springboard here in the city of Lucknow. As we witness experts weigh in on the role that the city's rapidly maturing infrastructural, agricultural and industrial landscape will play in making the vision around a $1 trillion economy materialize.
I'll bring you in here, Anuj. I was very surprised to hear that, for example, Lucknow does have quite a bit of presence in the R&D side of things. For example, the National Dairy Development Board does have an active R&D center here. The National Handloom Development Corporation also has a strong presence in Lucknow. So if that's the case, if the Gyan is here, then where is the problem with respect to it infiltrating?
Thank you, Pooja.
Yeah.
So I think just adding one more point for Jyotsna, world over, if you look at 22% of the land is fertile and used for agriculture.
Right.
In India, it is 60%. In UP, 90% of the land is fit for agriculture. And very rightly said by Mr. Jainji, UP still is the largest producer of grains, but not the largest food processor. And there is a lot of opportunities in terms of adding value in that. And as you rightly said, R&D facilities, countries, almost all top-notch institutions for research are available in the state. But as entrepreneurs, and Jayant and Viram talked about how the role of the government has changed, but I will talk about what is the importance of the entrepreneurs and the media in actually capitalizing on the research part. As manufacturers, as people in the sector, industry still is focused more on harnessing the opportunity of what is already present, rather than looking at comparing themselves to international benchmarks and going into research and development and creating products which are world class. So if truly we want to be growing at 30%, which I truly believe is possible. As Mr. Bhavesh said, nothing is impossible until it's done. I feel that we have to change our benchmarks for the industry. As entrepreneurs, we need to start comparing ourselves to international peers in terms of quality, in terms of research. Just sharing an example about dairy industry. In India, the average produce for an animal in India is 3,000 liters per annum. In Israel, it is 12,000. With the same amount of cattle, we can produce 4 times more milk. That will lead to increase in the farmer's income. So there are a lot of examples like this. Also, I would like to say that there's a huge role that media and entertainment has to play. While we put the responsibility and onus on the government to help the state grow, but if you look at all the series, all the Netflix series or any entertainment series that comes out of UP, they show crime, they show violence, they show people in a very bad light. Now think of a company which is based out of Gorakhpur and wants to raise capital in the finance market through an IPO or a PE. I don't think that people are interested in doing that. And media has to play a role, and thank you for organizing this session in Lucknow. I think this will really help.
I'm curious as to your view. I know that the government has set up a 100 crore, seed fund to essentially help startups develop. But do you believe they are proactively doing enough to inculcate a startup culture so that next gen UP, not just next gen Lucknow, next gen UP becomes all the more self-reliant? Or are we sort of gravitating away from tech and going towards our more traditional strengths? Be it Zardozi, be it chicken curry, and the list goes on. There is no choosing between the two in terms of right versus wrong.
Yeah, so if you look at, in the IDFC presentation also, it was mentioned that India as a country, we have the third best startup ecosystem, right? UP is also catching up, but the problem is there's been so much of brain drain of UP people away from the state because of lack of economic opportunities, except largely in the national capital region, in Ghaziabad, in Meerut, in Noida, and Greater Noida, those kind of areas. Now coming to the next thing which you talked about, see, UP is the richest state in the country in terms of the cultural industries, in terms of chicken curry in Lucknow, Zardozi. Muradabad has so much of brass work. Saharanpur has woodwork. Firozabad has glass work, right? Khurja has pottery work, Aligarh has locks, and Meerut has sports goods. You name, Kannauj has Itra. No other state in the country has such a rich belt of handicrafts and handlooms and cultural industries, right? And UP government came up with a very, very bright idea of the one product, one district concept, right? I think it could have been a game changer, right? In the sense, the idea was that look at which is the prime, cultural or handicraft-based industry. It could have been any industry, but in UP's case, as it turned out to be, it was largely cultural and handcrafted products, which emerged as the number one product in that district.
One thing that's particularly unique about Uttar Pradesh is how it's embraced public-private partnership models, whether it be in the context of energy, whether it be in the context of infrastructure, and I realize that's a big bucket, education, and the list goes on. So, Jyotsna, how would you characterize the success of this particular blueprint, and is it a model that other states need to emulate?
We produce the best mangoes, I think, all over India. If you can talk to somebody from Lucknow about mangoes, they can literally, have an argument with anybody else from anywhere in the country. I've been working on a mango festival, and the idea of that was to bring private-public partnership, because the best work that can be done anywhere across the world is when governments and corporates and people work together, actually.
Please, Vinamra.
If you look at what is happening in PPP, in public-private partnership, it is essentially happening in infrastructure, whether it's power, whether it's roads, whether it's hospitality. And the reason is very simple. Because, unfortunately, over the past so many years, we've not focused on those sectors, on that infrastructure creation. Today, if we need to build that infrastructure, the need is just so large that government will not be able to do it on its own. And hence, if you ask me that if is PPP a choice? No, I don't think so. I think it's an imperative, because if we want those highways, if we want those airports, if we want those energy lines, if we want those hotels for tourism and hospitality, we cannot do it by ourselves, and government cannot do it by ourselves. So I think today it's really an imperative, but not a choice.
And I think you had a comment to make, and I'll still have you weigh in as well.
No, I think I completely agree with Vinamra. Just one more thing, I feel that this similar thing, what is happening in infrastructure, needs to happen in other sectors as well. There are a lot of sectors, for example, mango, there's a huge mango pack house in Maliabad. But, and Alfonso, you always seem to have prices which are much higher than the Dasheri mangoes from here. And the reason for that is very simple. Alfonsos are used primarily for processing and making mango pulp, which is used around the year. Whereas for the Dasheri mangoes, there is no processing unit in the state. So I think a PPP in sectors like food processing, in other sectors also is equally important. Sure. And that is something that the government has to work on. There are a lot of facilities, for example, in dairy sector. I work in dairy sector. So there are a lot of plants that the government had put, and they are now defunct. They are not operational at the moment. The idea should be to let them operate on a PPP model. It's beautiful infrastructure, but the government doesn't have the bandwidth to operate them. So PPP is something that is only leveraged in infrastructure right now, but can be used in multiple other areas, and that is an area that the government should look into.
Well, you've all shared so many wonderful insights, but sometimes what's overlooked on these panels are commonly made mistakes. So I'd like to turn to each one of our panelists. If you were to go back in time to perhaps when you first started your careers, all right? What do you know now that you wish you knew then?
When I started, I used to work very hard. Those were the 6-day-a-week kind of a syndrome. And very often I used to work even on Sundays, burn midnight oils. My dad used to tell me, Jayant, I always keep you slogging. It's like you'll burn like a candle at both ends. You shouldn't do that. I've never seen you network with people. I've never seen you cultivate, bonds with people at your workplace and elsewhere, the larger community, the customer base. My response as a young graduate used to be, Dad, I mean, these things were important in your days. Now the value that I bring on the table for my organization will make me, or, these things don't matter as much. But believe me, with every passing year of my life and career, I have realized that how true he was and how wrong I was at that point of time. Life, sometimes you get a feeling that it's all about networking,
Incredible. Jyotsna.
So I think it's find what you love to do and make your passion your profession, because I think, like Jayan said, it's the people that really make whether your organization or the things that you do, the people you interact with, that's the most important.
You, Anuj, and then I'll give you the last words.
Yeah. So I think I resonate with what Jayan ji said. What I know now, and I didn't know back 17 years back when I started business, is that life is more like a marathon and not a sprint. You don't need to run too fast to reach somewhere. If I were to go back and live back, I would probably drink a little more, travel a little more, spend time with my friends, go to art shows and enjoy movies. So what I see now is that at that point of time, I was so impatient for success that you're working too hard for that. And that is something that I think the wisdom has come at the moment.
Lovely. The floor is yours, Vinay.
15, 20 years back, when we were much smaller than what we are today, I think I used to make the classical small entrepreneur's mistake of A, thinking very localized, and B, thinking very short term. I work in the energy and the power sector today, and that's our primary line of work. And we are seeing tremendous demand all across the world, not just in India, but globally. And I'm sure some part of that was always there, but it wasn't that way in India 15 years back. It was a very, very difficult sector to be in. That probably also forced us to think very, very short term, to think about how we're going to be paying our salaries the next 6 months from now or 1 year from now, whether we'll have enough work on our hands or not. And we didn't focus that much on, and again, probably Anuj touched that in the beginning, in terms of doing product development, in terms of doing technology development that could help take us to the world, because we were also not that ambitious enough. We didn't have that kind of confidence on ourselves. And I think hence, if I were probably growing up today or building my business today, probably I would do it very, very differently in terms of being able to deploy that, use all of that, see what opportunities are available globally.
So much candor and clarity from our panel. A huge round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, that concludes our coverage of the Leaders of Tomorrow's Springboard in the iconic city of Lucknow. I'm Pooja Jain signing off. We'll see you next time.